Now on this tape somewhere, maybe not in the very beginning, but we're going to be laying out the canopy for this plane. We're just waiting for Midgley. He's got the thing done, it's in the mail, but of course thanks to the snow we're dead in the water. Now I've done, and there's two different kinds of canopies. The bubble canopy like Strega, and of course that's on video documented for whatever. And this will be the turtle deck canopy type, similar to a Nobler, where you have to work in a turtle deck. In fact, the Spitfire is even a little more difficult than that, because behind the pilot's seat there's actually a window. Now here's a close-up photo that I have hanging in the shop here, and you can notice I have a nice joystick, a relatively nice seat with seat belts and buckles and phony rivet heads and whatever, and it's in a turtle deck mode. So one of the things I always do is before I start making any part of a plane, canopy, wheel pants or whatever, I try to look around the shop and get some inspiration, get some ideas. Now I don't know if you can see the instruments that are in this. This is the Red Baron, of course, and this is probably as close to being the type of canopy that we're going to do. You can see the sticks sticking up the seat belts. You know, and back years ago, and I'm going way back to Harold Price's day, everybody had canopies. It was always the focal point of the plane. Nowadays, a lot of planes still have canopies. Some do, some don't, but it's still the focal point of the plane. Still something, when you put a new plane out on a field, it's one of the first things everybody looks at. Now this is another, just thinking of things right now. There's a picture of Jimmy Casale when he won the Nats in Virginia. And I remember his jet. This is not the one he had. He had two jets. And in the middle of the winter, we were talking about canopies and whatever, and he decided to go home and make the other plane that he had have a canopy and all kind of little detailing in it, and he did a super job. And I remember thinking, what a shame that the plane without a canopy flew better than the one with a canopy. So it's the way life is, baby. This is my MiG. The MiG, of course, had a really detailed canopy, bubble type canopy. Again, I like to just look around just to get ideas. The more ideas you have, you always can steal ideas from people. Never pass up a chance to get good ideas. Now even the Sidewinder, Brian Kiefer has the Sidewinder. Even the Sidewinder had a great little canopy. So again, this is just the kind of thing. The Griffin had a nice canopy. Just the kind of thing. I want to look around. Before I start working on this, I want to get as many ideas and as many thoughts in my mind so I can lay this out and make it as nice as possible. Look at this Hawaiian Joe over here. What the hell's he, Arthur Godfrey? Arthur Sidewinder. And this was my 1984 plane, the F-16, and this had some oh man, was that canopy beautiful. Again, just looking around, get all the ideas you can before you start a project. No, I mean, is this ever detailed? This, you really don't even notice it in a photo, but this really had a nose section to kill for. All kind of reverse filleting, and oh, this was a plane I flew in Reno in 1984. And it was a good one. But again, what I'm concerned with here is some inspiration for some canopy detail. Now talk about the old man in the sea without the sea. This is me in 1967. But notice the canopy detail. Even back then, canopies. By the way, this was the first Super Tiger 60 stunt ship ever, of all time, period. I don't care what the facts are. That's the truth. This is 1967. Just think about that. Now even my 1980 sweeper had a really nice canopy. Of course George has this down in the cellar of his house right now, but again, nice canopy detail. It was well thought out, well executed. I don't know if you can get a good view of this. This is Robbie Hunt's plane, like the Billy Werwich designed, the Geo Max or whatever, Geo Star. But look how nice the canopy is. That really does add, it really does add a nice dimension. And of course the worst thing you can do, if you have the old Strega videos or the old Sidewinder videos, dig them out and go look at the, which we'll be doing before we actually start the canopy anyway. Get some more ideas. Now speaking of, look at this outlaw. Gee, this is when I had hair. Anyway, this is me flying my real air coupe, and I can remember when I did some of these canopies going down to the airport to look at real airplanes and get an idea what the canopies look like. And in this case, one of the things I'm going to do is dig out those Spitfire books and look at what a real Spitfire canopy is supposed to look like. There's a picture of Ted Fancher's canopy, and Ted, of course, always has nicely detailed canopies. One of the nicest ones. Werwich, all beautiful, real nice. Now this is a real Spitfire canopy, and of course this is what we're trying to simulate. A couple of decisions. Obviously we are not going to have a mirror on top of the canopy. This is not that much of a scale job. But I want to simulate this window that goes right behind the pilot seat. You can see where the pilot seat originally starts, the Malcolm hood top, and then behind it there's like a half a bulkhead, and I'm going to have to research out what kind of detail goes in there. And of course a dashboard. Now, if we were making a scale model, of course, we'd try to include this little door in, but we'll probably just do that with an incline. But again, look at some of the detail. The way to research some of this stuff out is get some photographs like we've been doing, and just try to see now, how much detail can we reasonably include in on this. Now, here's a shot that shows the pilot's headrest. That'll be good to just to know if we can get that headrest. That's one of the things we probably can include in. See, some of the decisions I made, I wanted to do all this rib cage work with paint. I didn't want to do this with having ridges in the canopy, because from wiping the plane off constantly, you'll wear the paint right off of the edges. But we could probably simulate this window with an incline. Again, these are things I need to think about. I need some input from Joe. He'll have some ideas, I'm sure. We could simulate this. This is the track where the canopy slides back. What we really need to do is find out what's in that little area back there, so we just don't have an empty box. You can just get some rough idea of how many choices there are here, and I can't even decide what color I want to paint this plane yet, so imagine what I'm going through here, an emotional wreck. Now what would be cool, I'm just thinking, Adam Musko will think of stuff like this. You could make this little mirror just drop into a little piece of brass tubing or something, and then when you fly, take it off. Joe, come up with some ideas here. I'm going crazy. Now this shows some of the detail in the door. Again, there's so many choices, but having the ideas will give you the most choices. Nah, my head is spinning. Let me go down in the shop. Time to go to work. Now, believe it or not, right on the day that we're ready to do canopies, President Nixon calls. Oh, believe this. Midgley, you've outdone yourself. I hope you already sent one of these to Adam Musko. How many did you make in here? Oh, I see what he did. He's got some made out of thick material, some out of thin material. It really does have the Malcolm hood look here. Anybody want to buy a canopy? Anyway, these are the heavy ones. Nice and thick. All right. How many we got in here? Thin ones, thick ones, I gotta see if he sent one to Joe. I'll give him a call tonight. These look gorgeous, by the way. Canopy City. Now, the reason we made so many of these is because I don't know, once I start doing this, if I'm going to want to trim one, cut one, overcut one, undercut one. But I know one thing for sure, you're always better having too many than not enough. So if anybody out there wants to build a Spitfire, don't worry, we have a Canopy. This would probably fit on other planes too. Anyway, we have them. They've arrived. Midgley, you're okay. And what I'm doing, this is really overkill within overkill. I'm looking through the canopies one by one. One of these has a little bubble, a blister, or whatever. So I'll find one that's not really in perfect condition and use this to cut out my pattern when I go to cut the pattern out. So this has a few flaws in it. This one is perfect, so I'll save this for the real canopy. I'll use this one to make up what will amount to be a pattern, and then I'll have a pattern. Now I also want to find one more that has no flaws in it for Bob Martens. It looks like he's going to be, this one's nice. It looks like he's going to be building a Spitfire too. Well, Bob, I'll ship this out to you today. This one has a little ridge, a flaw here, so we'll put that aside for patterns. Again, about half of them are real good. This one's fine. This one's perfect. Ooh. Keep that one for myself. Keep that for me. Not really. These little flaws sand out in the final coats of clear, but it's nice to be able to start them. These are really nice. Really, really nice. I'm impressed. Now I'm just going to take, this is the one that's got a molding flaw in it, and just try to make up a rough little pattern here. And then when I get the final cut on this, I can obviously send it on to Adamusco and to Bob Martens too. It'll save him a little bit of work. Since we're using molded parts, you would think these things are going to be pretty much the same. Again, this I'm just going to do by eye, go over to the model and see, get an idea of how this is going to fit. Now I'm just holding this in rough position, and I want to do this. I'm laying a pen, same way as when we installed the tail. I'm trying to pick that curve up. Let the pen rest right on the fuselage. Okay, now after the first cut, you can see the front of the canopy is too high. See how I'm not picking up the angle of the turtle deck here? Because that's where the window is going to get cut into that turtle deck. So what I'm saying is I know now I need to lower the front of this by the amount, somewhat close to the amount that's up there. I need to bring the front down until I have a perfectly parallel line with the top of the fuselage. This is why it's handy to have a pattern. In case you go too far, you just go get another canopy. Well, what I'll do, I'll take a thinner ink marker and I'll pick up this curve. This will just get me real close, I hope. Again, this is just like when we put the top block, the turtle deck, down over the stab. Just keep taking smaller and smaller pieces off each time until we get this angle to match right up here, and then we can cut the window. Now from this view here, it looks like I have to go down about another 1/8 of an inch. I'm still a little bit high here. And again too, that reduces the amount of bubble. If you prefer more bubble, you could leave it a little high in the front. But I want to get the turtle deck and that back piece in perfect alignment, then I'll know. And I'll just take another ice shaving off the front and keep dropping that down until I get it exactly how I want it. Now if you only had one canopy, you'd have to be real careful that you're not going too far. Because we have all these canopies, we can, we could be a little more aggressive. Now what I like to do is cut the big parts with the scissor and do the final trimming with the sanding drum. I don't like to do the final cut with a scissor because it spreads the material. But for now, and I also want to continue this radius around here. Again, an old-fashioned trick, if you couldn't figure this out, what we could do is get this mold, put sandpaper on it, and just sand the canopy in. But this is getting us close enough. Boy, that's just about as good a fit as the real Spitfire had. Okay. Now after all that fooling around, I want to make what's going to be a permanent pattern out of this. So what I did, I laid that on top of another canopy. This is not a good canopy. This is one of the ones that has a little floor in it. And I'm looking down the side here. See where I have the blue tape? I want to get the lines even, because here's what I'm trying to avoid, is to have the canopy sitting on a model where it lines up but it's off to one side or off this way. I want to have it straight. And see, by looking at the front of this, I can see I haven't picked up a really straight line. And I'm already on the small side, so I want to add the amount of material that's left in the blue tape. And I'll use this now just as a pattern. This is gone. Leave the material on that's up to the blue tape, and then make sure, then only trim the one side until I get it perfectly straight. See, now with the blue tape, what that's going to allow me to do is lower this line down to where it actually will pick up the joint here. I'm just a little bit on the shy side, and to catch some wood here, I'd have to squeeze this in. I don't want to do that. So again, that's what's handy about having a lot of canopies. I've cut just a little too much off of this one, but this will allow me to get right back where I started from. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch. I have the original pattern, how much I want to leave for my last little sanding, and then I can just taper this in. Can lay this on. And that'll give me an extra 1/4 inch of material, but I'll also have the contour just about right too. I can just taper that right in. Now unfortunately, I just got the word from the boss that playtime is over here and it's time to take her shopping. And believe me, with all the snow we have out there, God, what a mess. I don't mind doing it. It is usually a lot better than this around here. Now, if I look through this, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, I've got both sides built up quite a bit. I'm going to cut this and then we're going to pick this up tomorrow. And it's always a good idea, especially if you only have 1 or 2 canopies, cut them a little oversized and do the last little bit with a Dremel sanding drum or the sanding, you know, the belt sander. This way you have a little bit better edge on the back. It's a shame when you don't get a nice edge, but you have the shape right. And then you have to, yeah, in effect, you ruin another canopy. Okay, see, I've left the blue tape on. That should just about almost do it, I hope. Famous last words. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to get to do tonight. Okay, see, now I've picked up just about the right amount of material. So now, in effect, this now becomes my #1 pattern. And I get the squeeze on this, and I have enough material that I can sink that down into a ditch. That's just about what I want. And the last thing I want to do is get this curve up here, and I can probably do that with the belt sander, the wheel on the belt sander. Now, I'm looking straight from the front and trying to get this so both sides are identical. So now this radius here is just about what I want, and I'm going to try to get a nice edge on this. Boy, it's good to have the tape as a guideline. Oh, that puts a perfect edge on it. Now, I've just been trying to do the edges. I'm obviously not going to finish it. The wife is saying, "We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go." I'm sure you've all experienced this. Welcome to the real world. Now I'll finish trimming this canopy tomorrow, getting the stuff ready. Boy, oh boy, shopping. We go shopping 4 times a week. We never have. Now I got about an hour here tonight, and I just want to. I don't have really enough time to do any work on the canopy, so what I want to do, all these little areas, the holes and the edges here, the epoxy, when I did this epoxy before, the thin epoxy runs its way down. Now it's still kind of half-assed soft, it's not a 24 hours old, so I can still get in there and sand the edges down, get the drips and drools cleaned up, and it's a good time to do that. It's easier to do it now than once it turns to glass hardness. Now what's really nice, if you can catch it, is when it's right about now. This is about 12 hours it's been sitting here. It's hard, and yet I can still cut it easily. It hasn't turned to glass yet. So I can cut out all of the openings. And I can get the dowel with the sandpaper in there now. I can also trim all the cowling edges. This is real nice. I've just caught this at the right time. And so I figured I'd spend a little time doing this here before I go on with the canopy. Again, remember that thing I was talking about on a previous tape, of time management. I always want to have something drying and something ready to work on here. And I've still been thinking about this canopy. Now, if you ever want to see how strong this is, just take a piece of this glass cloth. Even though this hasn't totally kicked off, this is really, it's unbelievable how strong this is. And the purpose of it is, the reason it's a little bit better than carbon fiber, it bends without breaking because you have a weave. It's always a little bit better if you can get the weave at 45 degrees. I've tried to, but of course once you trowel it in, there's no guarantee. But boy, that stuff is strong. There's no way I can break this with my strength. Probably means I'm a wimp, though. That's really nice if you can just clean off all the epoxy that, in this case, not much has dripped into these air exhausts, but sometimes, depending on what cowl shape you have, the epoxy will run down into the little outlet holes and things. It's a kind of a pain in the neck. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the whole object of this is so I can get this, maybe I even mentioned it before, I can get all this glass drying. Everything will harden up. The longer you let the glass dry, the better off it is. I could be working on a canopy while this is drying up. Especially good where that pointy sanding block comes in. By the way, if you're having trouble with cowl fits as you paint the plane, with this kind of cowl, this corner fills up with paint, or glue in this case. There's epoxy in it, and the cowl doesn't want to go on right. You got to constantly... Now, even though I didn't get, really too much done tonight, I got a little bit done on getting the canopy to fit a little bit more like what I had in mind, and I got the edges of the glasswork squared away here. So now, tomorrow or the next time I get to work on this, while I'm working, finally, after fooling around for quite some time yesterday, I have what I think will be a decent fit here, relatively good fit anyway. Now what I want to do back here, if you look at a Spitfire canopy, this window comes roughly to about here, so I'm going to try to do this. The way I'm going to do is lay it out with the blue tape, make my final cuts, make sure it's equal, and then cut this piece of wood out of here, so this will be the area where the window is in the canopy. Now I'm just going to measure this off. It's about 15-20% of the way up. That window starts and goes back. So I'm going to do this. This is all just by eye anyway. And better to make it a little too small, and we can make it bigger later than to make it too big, of course. Now here's where it really is handy to have the canopy in the picture, and you can kind of hold it up and say, further back, further forward. I just want to lay this all out with tape. I think that right now that'll just give me a little overview of what this is going to look like ultimately. See what you can do, you can just sight down and see that you have both sides parallel and both sides even. If they're not, of course, you can pull up the tape. In this case, this has to go down just a little bit. And I can compare it pretty much to the photograph, get some idea if I'm right or wrong or indifferent or what. Now, the nice part about putting the tape on and being able to move it around and make some lines thicker and some thinner. See, what I'm trying to do is I want to paint inside the canopy, but I want to know exactly what spots I'm going to be able to see from outside the canopy. So I know now with the tape on the outside of the canopy, I can easily and conveniently paint the inside. It'll be no problem at all. In fact, I could even just put this over the canopy that I'm ultimately going to use and use this for a pattern. I don't even have to use this. So I traced out the outside here to get a rough idea where this is going to ultimately sit. So, you know, at least according to the drawing, I'm looking at this line here is a little thinner than this one. This is that bulletproof piece that used to be in the front of the Spitz, and I still have to cut out the opening for the window yet. So this gives me a lot of choices. I can go back and move the tape, change it, whatever, without making a big project out of it. And I can look inside. See, by looking inside, I can see exactly where I'm going to see the inside, and I want to be able to paint that, of course, and put rivet details and things like that on there. Now here's a good little tip, believe it or not, Karen gave me. When I was grinding away on these canopies, and I've made 3 of them so far here, what happens is they get staticky, and the static makes everything stick to them like crazy. So I asked Karen about static guard. She gave me this thing that goes in a dryer. If you wipe the canopy a little bit with this dryer, it tends to stick a lot less. You don't get all that dust on it. Now what I did, I have 3 canopies made up so far. I want to try tinting one just to see what it's going to look like. I want to leave one clear right up to the final moment here. I want to make sure I have all the fits okay. Okay, now what I have, just to give you an idea, here's the number 2. This is my pattern now for putting on all the lines. And what I can do, say if this is the canopy I decide I want to leave one clear and tint one. I can take this canopy, put it on top here, line up all my lines, and then paint in here. Mask or paint in here. Take this off. Then I'll have the choice of one that has no lines on it. I've cut this little notch back. And before I actually cut this in, I want to decide if I want to have this tinted or not. I'll tint it with, well, I'll show some of it on camera anyway. Tint it with Rit dye and boiling water. But I also want to have a clear one, just so I have 2 choices here. I want all these choices. This is absolutely going to be the focal point of the plane. I don't want to skimp on doing something shoddy here. This, by the way, will take, I'm allowing probably a week or so of shifts now and then. I haven't been able to get full, really full shifts in the shop, but I would like to see what that's going to look like tinted, and I would like to see what it's going to look like clear, and I'll have, at the last minute, I'll have 2 choices, and I'll have the extra canopy, whichever one doesn't work out, I can either, mail to Joe or Bob Martens if they want it. So we'll wind up with some spare parts here. Now I'm just truing up all the edges on the one that I'm going to tint. It may seem like it's a lot of extra work doing this and having all these spare parts and patterns and everything, but remember, we're building more than one model here. Now the other point that I want to make is, is right up into the very last second, and it's right now, I don't even know what color I want to paint the plane. That's how undecided I am. But I always have those Spitfire books, and without those Spitfire books, boy, I'd have less amount of ideas than I have right now. Okay, I'm going to boil up some water. Make sure we don't have to do any more cutting. And get one of these guys tinted up. Again, I can tell you from experience too, one of the things, never do the inside details on the cockpit until you have the glass work exactly how you like it. Because you're never going to know to the last minute how you're going to, all the details inside, what's going to show, what's not going to show, from what angle is it going to show. It's like building a model railroad. You don't want to get all those details done and then put the canopy on and then decide, You'd like to get, if possible, get the glass work exactly the way you want it. And having this pattern is going to be a big help no matter how this goes, no matter how I want this to go. And I've said it before, this is an adventure. We don't know exactly where we're going. And with all these Spitfires, Now step one is I want to take, obviously you don't go use your best canopy, the first canopy or whatever. Some of the ones I've cut up and they haven't come out perfect I'll use for testing, because you don't know exactly how long you want to leave this in the mix. This is blue, kind of a purpley blue dye, which would be pretty, you know, realistic. It wouldn't be, you know, like yellow or something. This is kind of like what a sunglass would have been in the 45 era. Anyway, I'm stirring the dye up. I put about 2 quarts of water, maybe 1.5 quarts of water in with the blue RIT dye. And you never know, these are pieces that I fooled with and I wasn't happy with the way they came out. So you want to hold it by something that you're gonna paint over that anyway. If it's boiling too hot, it'll melt. If it's not hot enough, you won't get any tint. You want to be just under the boiling point. That's when you see bubbles, you know it's a little bit too hot. And don't do what I've done many times, is put it in the dye and walk away. You walk away, I go answer a phone, you come back, you have a black canopy, you'll never see the canopy details. This is ordinary RIT dye, it comes like a powder. And you just put it in with water that's just under the boiling point. If it's boiling, it's probably going to melt the material. This is already getting dark. Now don't forget, you're looking through 2 layers of glass, so you don't want it tinted either real light. You want it lighter than you ultimately want it to be. If it's dark, it's going to be too dark, and what's going to happen is you're not going to see any of the details. I won't mention any names, but there's a nationally known flyer whose canopy is so dark you can't see any detail inside. Enough said. Get myself in more trouble here. Okay. Now just let that dry off and then we'll see if we like it. Now when I took that one outside in the sunlight, you're not going to see it on the video, but this one is just the slightest bit tinted. You have to put it up against a white background. Now this one I want to dye just a little bit more. Make this one just a little darker, and then what I'll really have is 3 choices. Remember, as the dye gets hotter, you don't want to get it to boil. That's the one thing you don't want. The hotter it gets, the quicker it puts the dye into the plastic. That's already starting to melt the canopy. That's a little bit too hot, so I got to back off on the heat here. Now I'll wait off camera a few minutes till that dye cools down. There's already smoke coming off the dye. Maybe that's just a little bit too hot. Now this is the one that went into the dye that was too hot. You can see what happened. It curled up. Well, you could also, if you really wanted to be a fanatic, you could warm this up with a hairdryer and bend it back into position. This is hot water I'm running on here. Now as soon as you're done with the dye, you want to just run hot water over it and then dry it off, and of course you'll notice you get the dye on your hands and all your little cuts will really feel good at the end of this. Now that one has more dye in it than the original one. Now I'm going to let the dye cool down and do one more before I do the good canopy. You always should have, you could even do this with scraps of plastic. You don't have to use real canopies. But if you were going to use a canopy, you sure as heck would like to start with more than one. That would certainly be an advantage in this case. And the glass work is so important. If the glass work isn't right, all the details inside just forget it. Now I put this on a white paper towel so you can compare one with no tint, one with very little tint, and one with maybe an extra 30 seconds of tint. And you could make this, anywhere from almost clear to, and we haven't eliminated me even doing the clear. I'm just going to make one more and then I'm going to do the final one. Alright, this is the last test. That die is just about the right temperature that isn't curling the plastic. So I'm going to take the good canopy that I have so far, the good one that I have, best one out of this set. You can see the stuff still comes off. That's about the amount of tint I want, so I have one left. This hopefully will be the good one. Now, just a couple of thoughts here. You don't ever want to make the canopy die any darker than you originally think you want it. And you don't want to leave it now. See the water spots that are coming up on here? I want to run over and rinse this off. The water spots will give you an uneven dye, uneven effect. So this is hopefully going to be the good one. I'll drink this off, get this off, and then rinse this right off. This one looks just like it has just that hint of tint that I was looking for. I don't want this to look like, not looking for, Judge Dredd look or something here. I just want to have just a little tint, and the tint really does, when it's done properly and not over tinted, it really adds a nice dimension to the plane. If you overdo it, it starts to have that toy look. This one looks like it's going to be just about what the doctor ordered. Now, one other trick, one tip, trick, whatever you want to call it. Let me put these in order. One of the things you want to be careful of, the dye, let it cool, wash the pan real good with Brillo, and get all this crap off your hands if you can. My hands are all chewed up from work yesterday, and boy, I'll tell you, 1,000 little cuts here. That dye gets in there. It doesn't do them a lot of good. Okay, this will add to our choices as we do the final, getting the glasswork ready, getting the paint on the inside of the glasswork. This is one thing out of the way now, and it gives us plenty of choices and plenty of spares. Now against the yellow background you can see even better the difference in the tint. I gotta go into President Nixon calling. Oh man. Now I've spent a lot of time, believe me, getting this just exactly the way I want it. Both sides even, and both of these windows even, and this at 90 degrees. Now I just want to put a thin red line around the edge of this, now that I've kind of settled in on where I think this will be. And this will be the end of where I have to make my little trough. Notice that the pen is writing. This is a Bob Martin's pen. And he says if this one doesn't write, he's going to buy me pizza for life. Actually, this does work. You know what the trouble with pens is? You have to buy new ones every once in a while. That's the whole deal. And I'm too cheap. Alright, with the outline on here, the red is going to be our guideline, so to speak. Now I backed this out a little less than 1/4 of an inch. The red outline is the outline of the piece of plexiglass. Now I need to cut this window out, get rid of this part, and then I'm going to recess this whole edge in the thickness of the canopy and dig a little ditch up around here so that I can just sink that canopy right back down in there. Now just making sure all these edges are trued up. You can actually get in there and see the push rod here. Now I need to bring this forward and figure out exactly how much of this piece to remove so that I have the whole opening here. Now this is kind of a hit or miss thing until we get our dashboard pieces made up, but I'd like to get it at least symmetrical, get it even on both sides. And of course I can open it up more or put little filler pieces in as the case is. Good idea to save all these pieces. You never know what you can use them for. Okay, we got the rough cut opening here. I'm going to dress all these edges off, and I'm going to get ready to cut that little notch around there. I'm just taking little ice shavings away. The canopy, probably we want to wind up with about 25 thousandths of recess here. And the last thing I'll do then is just take the machinist ruler and some sandpaper and just go right until the canopy sits right down into this little notch here. Now I always run a line, but don't go right through, of course. I can run this over this way and just pick away little amounts. And you can see a little piece coming off now. Notice the grain is going the right way here. Again, if we had all choices, we'd just take off exactly as much as the canopy, but a little bit even more is okay, because we're going to fill this with filler and go over it with tissue and everything. By the time you sand it in, not a super exact thing, but you definitely just can't put the canopy on top. The canopy has to sit down in a little trough here. See, when the grain's going this way, it's kind of easy. And the other way, you just have to chip away at it. And it's kind of a hit or miss thing. You just don't want the canopy sitting on the outside and being a big bubble there. You can kind of do it by feel, the rough carving. That little machinist ruler with the 220 paper just taped to the end of it. Not exactly the same as just putting some masking tape down and painting it. I just want to score just above the red line. And then in this case I want to drop down. I'm trying to picture where this material would actually come from. It would take up this space right here. And it'll wind up almost going directly into a notch. Again, the material will come down here. We'll get kind of a side joint here without any problem. But up here it's almost a ditch. So I'm trying to make a transition in that shape. Now the machinist ruler lets you get a nice edge right in the corner, so that's one handy thing. I don't want to get the wood all paper thin, but I want to have that recessed right there. That is a joint right where this fuse side joins the top shell. It's just a hard spot in the wood. Now you can just take the machinist ruler and piece of brand new 220 and just cut yourself a little ditch. If you have a bubble canopy, well hell, that's all in the Strega video. Bubble canopies are easy. These are a little more difficult, but that's the challenge of modeling. The challenge of modeling isn't to see if you, at least for me, that you can grind out, you know, one ship after another and they're all pretty much the same. I like when each one is different. It's my thing. And I like when each one is a little more complex than the next. Making them complex is really a lot of work. Now I'm just feeling around to see any spots where this sticks up higher than it should. I want to make sure this line is parallel. I get a 90 this way and that the two sides here are equal before I do any detailing. So important and such a hard thing to convince people that you really should get all the glass work done. The glass work should be in the bank, all these little edges and stuff, all taken care of before you actually go on and do any detailing at all. Now this looks like it's going to be real nice so far. By the way, I like this. The light tint really does show up well. I don't know if you can see it on the video. Again, if you just press down along the edge and you find up, now see right here, I can see this is just a little bit of a hard spot. And when this is all done, I want to hit this with thin CA to harden up. All these edges are really relatively thin, paper thin in fact. And this will give me a little bit of strength, harden up the areas, and I'll have a perfect mount, and this canopy should just drop right in. But wouldn't it be neat if you could make this canopy so it slid back like the real one? Maybe I should be making scale models instead of stunt ships. Yeah, that looks, I'm looking from the front, from the side, feeling all around. That feels real good. Now I have this edge real nice, and I just want to get thin CA down in there to harden up the wood, and then I'll just touch sandpaper onto that so I have a nice hard area, because the epoxy, when we set this, it'll be in slow drying epoxy, and this will give it a good tooth. It gives a nice little ridge. Now that wood out there is now nice and hard and has pretty much the shape, the final shape I want it to have. Now what I'm doing, I'm going through my old paint. I want to mix up some paint that simulates zinc chromate. Zinc chromate is kind of like a yellowish green, and that's what they use on, well, they've always used it to protect the aluminum from oxidizing. So I need to get some yellow, I need to get some green. I think this is dark green. It says truck, it's black. Somebody put it in the wrong drawer. Get some colors together and mix this up. Now, usually what I like to do is mix up a little bit of dark, a little bit of medium, and a little bit of light of the zinc chromate so I can simulate 3 dimensions. So I get, again, I'm just going through scrap paint, and you got to use a little bit of artistic talent here to make things a little more detailed than they really are. Again, I'm looking through paint that's marked wrong and everything. I won't mention who did this. Oh, that's a nice color green. It's the green that matches my van. Again, if you want to make the color a little lighter, it's good to add a little white or yellow. Darker, just add a little black. By the way, just looking at this truck paint, I wonder how the Spitfire, that would be one of the greens, maybe the dark green. Again, this is anything but a hit and miss operation. Between green and yellow, that's a little bit too bright for zinc chromate, so to kill some of that I'll put some blue in here. I put about a spoonful of blue in here to tame this down. Now I want to go get some talcum powder. Now I'm just putting just enough talc in here so that this is now a dull color. It'll make it the equivalent of like military dull colors. And of course I'll run a little test before I actually use this. Add a little more talc, it's just a little bit too bright. Again, this is just back and forth, back and forth. Or you can really go out and buy those military flat paints, since this is not going outside of the plane, it's going inside. But then they take forever to dry, so where I want to get moving on this. I don't want to spend a week waiting for stuff to dry. Still a little bit too bright, just a bit. One little shot of black, I'm sure will kill it. Always add black very sparingly. More like it. Yeah, a little drop more. I think we'll have it. Just we have enough paint here to paint a real canopy. Amazing. Yeah, that's toning it right down. It kills the tone in it. Again, this is just a hit or miss, back and forth. Of course, one of the easy ways you could do is go down to an airport and buy some zinc chromate. That would be too easy. Somebody that works around an airport, Tom Richards works at an airport. Hey Tom, send me some zinc chromate. Stuff really is toxic to use though. You're better off using lacquer. Have to say so myself. We're getting close. Just go slowly. Yeah, Tom works for TWA, so he should be able to scam up some zinc chromate. At least he could use it for a color chip anyway, where I'm doing this more from memory. And one little bit more and I think we'll have it. That was just drying a little bit too shiny. A little test I did, so just add a little more talc until it dries flat. I just went over and compared this to the Red Baron, and looks like we're real close to having what we want here. Now what I did, I mixed up a little bit of the darker color, so I have two choices now to make the 3D effect. A little bit extra yellow in one, and a little bit extra black in the other. Alright, that's now our official Spitfire canopy paint. The light color, and I'll get another draw for the dark color. So I can go use this to test and see how I like this color up against some of the other pictures that I have with interiors. I think it's going to be good. Now this is just a test for my, actually it's practice. I want to put the two canopies together, and I just want to do a little test to see what this is going to look like when it's finished, and see if I'm going to be able to do this reliably. And I can just follow the blue lines here. This is not the good canopy, by the way. See, the blue lines act as a guide. The blue lines are on the outside of the pattern. The pattern is over the regular canopy. And this is just a test one anyway. But the whole point of this is a little practice right now, and then when I get to the real canopy, well, I hope I can get it real nice on the first shot. But again, we'll find out. Always a little bit of practice. I can get all these lines, I can kind of carry them. Now, when I go to do, because this will be on the inside of the canopy, what will happen is, when I go to do the inside, the outside, I mean, I can just use this as my reference, and I'm going to be using masking tape, and then each time I put a couple of coats of paint on, I'm going to move the tape up. So, this'll in effect be real handy if this becomes the final way of doing this. And I can still change it just by changing the tape. I can change this all along as I go. Now the part of it that's already dried up looks like it's just about the right dullness. Now if it was too shiny, I could add some talcum powder. If it was too dry, I don't want it to look like sandpaper either. If it was like that, then I just add a little bit of clear material to it. A little clear dope or acrylic here would do fine. Okay, I finished my little practice test canopy. Look at this, I look like they're having babies over here. And I also did one just puttering around here, just trying to figure out exactly, you know, how I want the stripes to look and the angles and stuff, and trying to look in a book and seeing if I'm getting close or not. So I let these angles dry up. Oh, while I have this on here, I want to bring the green up at least to the height and a little bit more, so when we glue this onto the wood, I don't see any of the wood sticking through on the edge. And I'll try to bring a little edge up around here, and I can see right around here I'm going to need some too. Now see, from this angle here I can see I'm going to remove some wood here so I can look inside. I don't want to make this too unscale. But on the other hand, what I'm trying to do here is pick up areas where I'll see inside and areas I've got these blanketed out well. Now I'm just going to make up, this is the piece that I cut out for the window of the canopy. But what I want to do is add just a little bit to this and make a bulkhead. 16th balsa with the grain going sideways here. This will be the bulkhead that goes down into the canopy. So I can use that for a test. It should fit right in there. This is ordinary, the colored paper that you buy for kids. I'm just going to glue that to one side. Let that kick off. Now the thick CA just holds this backing. I'm going to dust the edge off. Now this will be the bulkhead that goes as far back into that window area as I could get it. And the reason I want to use black is I want to make this look further, deeper and bigger than it really is. I glued that bulkhead right in back there. Make sure it's good and solid. And I want to paint inside here now before I make the shelf. I want to get some paint up inside there. Now what's real handy for blackening this in around the edges here is just a plain old big ink marker. Ink marker leaves a nice flat black, obviously a light finish too. It'll never peel off. And I want to just do this lip so I don't see this lip coming up. Now I'm just cutting out what's going to be a little floor for in by this window. Cross grain, so this will actually add some strength and integrity back here, but I do want a nice tight fit. Now I'll do the same thing. I'll laminate some of that black paper on this. In fact, instead of black paper, I think I'll look for some wet and dry sandpaper. That'll give a nice anti-glare look. Now this is just a piece of scrap 16th, and what happens when I laminate on, this is 400 wet and dry paper, I'll have a nice little anti-glare look, really at no extra work, and it'll have the finish already right on there. It'll also stiffen up the part. The idea is not to make the whole thing out of the same material or the same surface. You don't get any texture then. We want to have some texture, so each surface is a little bit different texture, a little bit different color. Now with that little shelf in there, that's got a nice texture, and with that back piece in total blackness, it gives the aura that's a little bit deeper and longer than it really is. And that's what I was looking for there. making up what I hope is going to look like that simulated bulkhead in the back of the radio compartment. Now, one of the tricks, if you ever want to get nice holes in plywood, is just use a grindstone. This is a Dremel grindstone tip. Don't use a cutter. I use the cutter first just to plot the holes and then finish them off with the grindstone. Now I'm using that piece that I cut off as a like a template, and I'll plot this. I'm not even going to be able to finish this part tonight. I hear that we have a lovely supper upstairs. We have brujol tonight. And to tell you the truth, I've had enough. So I'll pick this up tomorrow. This will be the little piece that goes right behind the cockpit. In the meantime, I can think of some other little details. And we'll be closing in on this pretty soon. See you tomorrow. Well, believe me, if this was a regular stunt ship instead of a Spitfire, I already would have renamed it the Snowbird. You got it, it's coming down again. And rather than work on a canopy, we're going to go shovel snow. This is a little view out our kitchen window. You can see that we've got about 6 to 8 inches here. Hey, isn't this fun? Used to be our grill. Hey, did Julia? I bet you got more than me. Yeah, Philly was supposed to get more than us the last storm. Oh, God. Anybody have some free airline tickets to Florida? Jeez. We're going to be ripping our Christmas decorations down this weekend, I guess. Still has all the stuff out here. This is what my porch looks like for the last month. Shovels, shoes, cold shoes, and snow. Forget it. And this is probably the last day that you're going to see this. We really have enjoyed sharing the village with you, and all the people that sent me pictures of their village in, and all the people that haven't put their village up, hey, put it up next year. We all enjoyed this. Jeff's taking his village down this weekend too. This has really been a lot of fun. Nice diversion. Just like being a kid again. I love it. Yeah, this has really been a year. I wish I was building a stunt ship called the Snowbird. It would be so appropriate. Midgley, I know, is laughing at me. Anyway, no work till tomorrow on the Spitfire. In fact, I can hear my wife's dolls right now.
Get your ass out there and shovel. Wendy, get out there and shovel snow, you fat ass.
Oh man, Champ, have mercy on my soul. Alright, tomorrow we'll go work on the Spitfire. We lose a day. We're back one day off. Yesterday really was the day from hell out there with the snow blowers, but it gave me some extra time to think about some ideas that I want to use on this cockpit. And what I try to do is anytime I have a little extra time and I'm caught up in some meaningless project like shoveling snow, gives me some time to think about how I want to finish off this canopy. Now, in the time since I last shot video, I got this little piece painted. This is the bulkhead, and what I'm trying to simulate, let's see if I didn't think about this. I'm trying to simulate this little piece back here that has the lightning holes in it, of course. That'll be that piece there, and there's also going to be one more of these bulkheads, so I think I'll work on that one next. Get these all out of the way, get them painted and ready to install. Now, to install this part, I want any pre-painted parts I'd like to put on with This is the will hold glue, alphatic resin. The reason for that is this will dry kind of clear, where CA will leave a glob. Get a small amount of that on. And I can use that little thing that John Pothier. By the way, this is a real handy tool. This is the Pothier.
Hello, my name is John Pothier.
Hey, he's doing a slam dunk job. In fact, I ought to put a little bit of glue right on this. The alphatic holds real well on pre-painted parts. You know, any extra glue that kind of oozes around here, you can just wipe with a Q-tip. Make sure we don't have any little drips or drools in there. Now just squeeze that to make sure the glue is getting a good bond. And we're ready to move on to the next piece. Next piece I want to do, I want to make this. There's a former that pretty much mirrors this image. I'm going to do it the same way. Now anytime you want to get real, you could never make this piece out of balsa wood, at least I can't. The best way to make it is out of thin pieces of plywood and then burn the holes in with the, I think I went through this so long shoveling snow, I'm going brain dead. But to make these pieces accurately, you really need to make them out of thin plywood. All laminates are 64th plywood. I want to try to make this piece up and then make sure the canopy fits on and that I have the right shape in there. Now this picture shows a pretty good view of what I'm looking at here, and I'm going to try to lay this out. Obviously it can't be scaled, but similar to this, and this piece actually will hold the headrest. So I'll try to lay out this whole bulkhead in one piece here. And there's several other pictures that let me go through. There's the dash. Obviously we're not going to have a scale dashboard, but some of the other pieces, see, like this one here, it shows just a flat bulkhead back there, and it shows I really still can't figure out what goes in that window, but we're going to work on something even if we dummy it up. Okay, what I did, I zona sawed in a few notches here. I took a piece of scrap. This is just going to act as a pattern, and now I'm going to trace this. I want this to go down as far as I can get it to go to start my pattern. And I'll bring it up and use that piece of turtle deck that I cut off to make this shape. I'll probably have to make it bigger, smaller. It won't matter. I need to make a pattern now. This will actually be a bulkhead and the back of the seat, or that headrest pad, all in one shot. Again, it's always difficult. The thing that's difficult here is we're really not making a scale model, but I would like to make it as scale as possible, as practical, without making this out of solid body putty or something that's going to be negative. I like the whole cockpit to weigh less than an ounce. Now as I push this down into the cockpit, I'm picking up the radiuses of those internal fillets. Here's what I'm trying to do, is get that just perfect, and I'm going to have to put a notch to the push rod. In other words, I have to start at some point and get this to fit tight, and then work my way up and get all the shapes transitioned on. Then, because it's a pattern, if I decide I need to make the bulkhead higher, lower, I'll put the canopy over this and then get that shape around the top that I'm looking for. But the pattern has to start at one end and work its way up. I really don't know any other easier way of doing it. Now I could just slide this down like a little guillotine. And again, if you've never done pattern making, sheetrock work or whatever, now I can see where it's, where's that pen? Where it's picking up on the push rod. I need to put a little notch in for the push rod here too. Now I ought to just mention one thing at this time. When you're doing a bubble canopy, it's easy to make, you try to make a sealed box and then put a coffee filter and a little hole in the back so it doesn't seal up. Now because we have so many pieces and angles and shapes, I'm just going to try for tight wood fits and leave one or two of them a little loose. Now this one is a little loose right here around a push rod so that this is vented. You don't want to make a canopy and the canopy is a sealed unit. That's when you get all that, I don't know what you call it, moisture inside or whatever. Or another thing I've heard happen is if you ever put it on an airliner and take it overseas, the canopy will break off as the plane goes to altitude. I've only heard that. Don't know if that's true. Anyway, I can see I have one more hard spot on here to take care of. And as you get rid of the hard spots, this is the same old technique. Just go back and forth. It's going to slide in like a guillotine. I have a hard spot over here. And I assume you can use this technique for doing really any kind of canopy. The more scale-like you make it, even if it's a cardinal, I think the better off it is. The Snowfire. This is the part of pattern making. It just takes time. If you're willing to pay a little bit of time, you'll get a nice tight fit. And keep in mind, this canopy is, if you had no strength and no structure up here, you just have a big canopy, every time you wipe the plane off, you'd be getting nothing but a lump here. Yeah, I want to make some structure and some rigidity. All these parts are made to at least add some structure. I'm just checking my push rod clearance. Check around the fits, and I'm leaving it just a little bit loose here so it won't be sealed to the outside air. Now the next step here, and I'm looking at this from a lot of different angles, I want to plot in where the top of this bubble canopy is going to wind up. So what I'll do, I'll just hold that little piece of turtle deck on here and trace it from the back and assume that I'll leave it a little oversized and then grind the last little bit down when I just hold the canopy in position. Now I have that little piece of canopy that piece of turtle deck I cut off, and I'm just trying, I'm trying to get a very light line on here. I'll leave it a little bit oversized, and this would be where I expect the canopy is going to rest. So I know the front shape of this is kind of a mirror image of this, close anyway, so I know once I plot this, now I can press down with the pen. Make this a little bit oversized, and I should have a good representation of what that bulkhead will look like. Again, pattern making, if somebody's never been involved in pattern making, it's probably one of the things you can pick up off the video. And I know one of the masters of making patterns that I've seen in my lifetime was Harold Price and Joe Kay. Both of them could plot out things that oh, look, I just broke the piece. No problem, I'll CA it back. This is only a pattern anyway. But keep in mind, if nobody ever shows you, their technology, it's difficult sometimes to figure out how to do this. By seeing a lot of different ways, and I don't say I have any headlock on this, but I certainly have a way that allows me to do a lot of nice canopies over the years. I've had some of them that have really been barn burners, some of them have just been adequate, but I consider the canopy in a Red Baron to be absolutely beautiful. To me, that is one of the nicest canopies that I've ever seen in a model plane. And unfortunately, it's one of the ones I don't have videotape on. It was one of the years I didn't have my own camera, and now I'm sorry I don't have it. Alright, I'm just going to glue this back and then do a test fit. Now the shape is real good. The only problem with the whole bulkhead is it's a little bit too far forward. So what I'm going to do is move this notch back, probably looks like 1/8 of an inch. All the internal and external dimensions are fine. I just need to move it back so it'll be in the right position. Now I notched and moved this piece back just so it would line up with the piece on the canopy, or somewhere near that. And I've made up a set of little patterns here for Bob Martens on a piece of paper so he could add them to the plans. And I'll save the original parts for Joe so he can do his canopy. Now it's real important not to have the parts too big. So I've been just undercutting all of the parts now just enough so they don't rub on the canopy. I don't want these actually touching the canopy. I want them to go up and give the illusion that they're glued to the canopy, but not be glued to the canopy. You can sight right down the front and see that this side is still a little big. This pretty much is just a do-it-by-eye job. Now you can see there's just a little bit of clearance around the top, just about what I'd like. Now I'll use this for the pattern, and I'll cut up the real piece. I'll make the real piece now using that for the pattern. Now what I want to do, I want to make this piece up out of laminated 30-second balsa so it has some grain strength. So I'll just trace the original here, and we've done this many times. Next piece, the grain will go top to bottom, side to side, and side to side. It'll be 4 pieces of 30-second balsa with the grain going in different directions. This will make it relatively strong, and plus I'm going to be drilling lightning holes and doing other stuff in it, but this does add some strength to the cockpit area. Now on the first piece I cut too, I'm going to add just about a 1/16 of an inch of extra material so that when I do the final fit I can get equal clearance around the whole part. In other words, I don't want to have the canopy off to one side or another. I can just trim and get a nice fit. I want the canopy to have just a little clearance around the whole part if possible. And I've gone, this is where the shelf, I've marked it on the pattern, where it winds up walking right onto the shelf. Now I CA'd the whole edge. I laminated 64th plywood to each side. I want to get a nice edge on there because you'll see that edge through the canopy at some point in time. And this now is made right off the rough pattern that I have. And I want to go do the final fitting over at the plane. Now I'm trying to simulate the back of that seat. And what I did, take the cut off one side. Once you have the piece off one side, and trace it onto the other side, and this way you get a relatively symmetrical cut for both sides in one easy step. Now I put the canopy on, made sure I had a good fit. This is starting to look like a Spitfire, and believe me, I'm going back to the drawing anytime I can. This little curve appears in the drawing in several of them, and that little piece in the back with the lightning holes, so it look like I'm you know, making some progress here. Except this is really taking a lot of time, believe me. Next thing I want to do is make up that little balsa headrest that goes on the back of that. It looks like just a little oval shape of balsa. I'll cut that, sand it to shape. I burnished in a couple of, just took the Dremel tool, burnished in a couple of simulated lightning holes on the back of the seat. Now this is just a piece of 3/8 scrap, nice soft scrap. I want to just get that shape on it, and I want to simulate just roughly. Again, I'm just doing this all by eye, by looking at the book and then trying to get it somewhat like the book. Now I'll just radius and round this off and then shorten it up until it looks like it's what it's supposed to look like in the book. And this is the little guy I'm trying to simulate here. I wish we had a clear picture of what was inside that window. That would make it a lot easier. I was just watching some wings here, some old wings, and I just happened to see some cockpit detail from inside a Jab Zero. Would look like something I could use. Probably it's all World War II stuff that's the same. Funny how I'm watching some wings here and trying to get some views from inside the cockpit. One pops up while I'm sanding the headrest of exactly what I'm doing. I put some thick CA on here. I don't need the penetration of thin. I just want to get this wood hardened up so that the paint won't sink in when I go to paint this. Again, if you had to paint this stuff with dope and put 8-10 coats on, you'd never get done. It's always a good idea. Just get some A little bit of thick CA on there, let it harden up, then sand it, and it's ready to paint. See, it's nice I can hold it with a 26 blade while I'm working on it. Now you didn't think I was going to install this headrest without first hollowing it out, did you? Come on. Come on, this is the Spitfire project. We're not building ironing boards and stuff. Okay, that's ready to install. And it's time. Also, one of the neat things is it's also time for lunch, so I'm going to go have a nice peanut butter sandwich. I marked a line from which I would not see this. I took the 64th plywood back off, just put some lightening in here. I want to leave some of that wood on there for stiffness. Now I just put a little green paint on this before I went out to lunch. Came back. This is relatively dry now. I can glue this into position and then start laying out the floor. Now one of the things you might be able to pick up, well, you definitely can pick up off the video, is the sequence of things that goes into making a canopy. In other words, you can't start by making up, at least I can't, gluing the top on and then working on the bottom. You have to, I'm starting from the back of the model, working to the front, and from the bottom to the top. And the last thing, of course, the glass fits. Now this is black acrylic lacquer with some more than the average amount of talcum powder in it. And what I'm trying to do is make a stipple effect that'll look something a little more realistic than just painting it flat black. Give it another texture. And when this dries, it'll look, well, I hope like a seat. Something like a seat. Anything like a seat. Okay, I got this now installed permanently with thick CA. Just going to let this kick off after the, there it goes. See, that actually adds some strength. It's almost like a former. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is lay out the floor. Again, that sequencing is such an important thing. If you don't have a plan, a clear plan for the sequencing, it can be a real pain in the ass. But I'm going to make a pattern up for the floor here. And each step of the way I like to look at it from a lot of different angles and just see that I have that seat lined up right in the right spot. And the floor is next. Yeah, made up the pattern and made the piece out of just 64th plywood. Glued it in around the edges. Now that seals us up here. Next thing I want to do is lay out the dashboard. And then I want to lay out some kind of little side panels here. Again, we can't make a scale dashboard. I know that's not one of the options I have here. But I can make, you know, something that simulates a World War II fighter. Now what I always do when it comes to dashboards, probably prototypical would be and I'm just doing this on the Macrons, to do it like, of course this is too high, it's going to get dropped down. This would be more prototypical, but what happens in a model, you don't see any of the instruments, and since we're going to have real glass and real simulated instruments, I want to lay it back on about a 30 or 40 degree angle so that the person looking at it can see the dashboard, or else all this work is for nothing. Now I did that on the Red Baron and I found out it worked better than I thought it would. It wasn't really prototypical. A P51 is straight up and down, but having that little bit of an angle, I think it's better for a model. Anyway, this is too long. I'm going to start shaving this down until I get just the height here that I want. Now one of the things I do is from my, this is the balsa pattern that I originally made, and I'm tracing the one side right up to about the middle, and then I want to take that piece, flip it over, and in this way I make a symmetrical part. Otherwise I run the risk that one side won't have the same curve as the other. That's a good tip for making symmetrical parts. Now I'll cut this out. This is now scrap. This will now be what I'll well, refer to here is P1. Again, the reason I'm doing this is I want to have patterns for most of the stuff here. And I also want to put this, I'm going to send this all out to Martens and hope he can include some of it in on the plans. Save you from doing all this work. If you ever want to, you can even copy this cockpit and put it on an SV11, you know. There's no reason not to do that. Now, first thing I'm going to do is join up 2 pieces of 32nd wood with the grain crossed. That'll keep this relatively nice and light. Let that kick off. Now I just got some thin CA here. I want to get the grain, cross grain if I can. Trying to get the grain going in all different directions. This is 64th plywood, the rest is 32nd balsa. And that'll be the base of our dashboard. Now I'm taking the side with the plywood. Notice that I really have a lot of glue on there. And this is 1200 wet and dry paper. And I'm sticking it down to this, smear it around because you need to have a total bond. Put it under a lot of pressure and let this kick off normally. And that now is the sandpaper, the 1200 sandpaper is the outside. That's the outside part of our dashboard. It'll be the finish that we're going to use. Just let that kick off normally. Just like to clean the edge off next. I'm just getting a loose fit here. Make sure that's about the way I want. I want to look at it with the angle on it too, with the canopy in place, and finalize it before I cut the holes for the instruments. Now here's a tip that'll really save you some money. Go buy one of these instrument kits, take the instruments out, and then go to a copy in place and have them shrunk down and enlarged. Make one sheet, like a Tom Lay Letraset sheet, and then reproduce it on a copying machine 8, 10, 15 times, and you'll have a lifetime of instruments. And that's exactly what I've done here. You can see I have the same instruments in probably 10 different sizes. They're J-Tech. You only have to buy the first set. Now, if you're really a cheap bastard, you can call me up and I might even send you a set for free. Or for not so free. Anyway, all different sizes. So now I want to scope this out, figure out what size I want to use on this dashboard. Get some idea. Okay, the easiest way I know of here, and it's a trick you can use on any plane, we have the sandpapers glued to this side. I put masking tape on top of it, trim this off, and then what it's going to allow me to do is lay out the instruments without ever touching the dashboard. Now I want to find a piece of copper tubing that's pretty much diameter of the instruments. That looks real close. What I'll do, I'll go over to the grindstone, put a nice edge on this. Now you can make up from the dashboard a dummy piece, and what this piece will allow you to do now is practice your instrument layouts any way you want without making any commitment. Once you figure out exactly how you want to have these spaced out or what you want the dashboard to look like, then you can go ahead and trace them out onto the real dashboard. So you can just try a couple of different arrangements, and I'm looking over at the book here and I'm not happy with either one of these, believe me. Now what I want to try also is, and it's one of the choices I have, is a symmetrical pattern. So to make a symmetrical pattern, I just take this on a folded piece of paper, cut this out, and then cut through one side. Now after fooling around here for quite some time, and you can see I looked at a lot of different ways of making up this dashboard, and I arrived at something similar to that, but I'm going to go lay it out even a little more carefully and then go punch the holes out. I finally laid it out right on my official piece here. Now what I like to do is take some 320 paper and just sand the 1200 sandpaper, and that gives it a very realistic metallic look. Now I want to take a piece of 64th plywood and just lay out exactly where the instruments are going to go on this. And then we're going to go over and select out the instruments that we want and just glue them right into position. Now I just laid this out, and of course you never committed to this. If you do it the arrangement the first time and you don't like it, you can just put another instrument right on top of the first one. Try to wipe out some of the extra thin CA and never hit it with kicker. Just let this dry out and then we'll see what it looks like when it's in the dashboard. I want to just carefully spread this thick CA. This is a piece of ordinary canopy material. I like to keep it away from, if possible, away from the instruments. This kind of spreads it out. And obviously no kicker, just let it kick. This becomes the glass that goes in front of all the instruments. Spread that out. I just got to babysit this a couple minutes till that kicks. Now I want to line the instruments up on top of this, and I want to make a real good impression in this piece of plexiglass. Without that glass, you don't get, as you walk, hard to explain, as the light shines on it, you don't see the little reflection of light off the instruments. You lose a little realism. Now I can pick this away. The only purpose of putting that is I'm going to put glue on the back of this, and then I want to drop this right on, but I don't want to do this. I want to try to drop it on and get it right the first time. Now this is going to become part of the laminate. But I don't want to have bubbles walk out into the instruments. So what I'm going to try to do, of course try to get it lined up good on the first shot. Keeping all these edges lets it be three-dimensional. Yeah, nice. That was pretty good. Okay, close enough. I'll let that kick normally. Now here's what I've tried. I gotta focus this in. Here's what I've tried to accomplish here is to have a flat kind of a metallic look to the dashboard. Have the instruments recessed so that from an angle you can see that they're recessed. And of course have that, and when this is out in the sun, this really, at least to me, it looks really cool. This is what the Red Baron looked. You'd walk past the model and you'd see the light shine off the instruments. And I always thought that really made it look realistic. Even George Gatiss would have been impressed with that. Anyway, that's not the end. That's just up to this step here, and I want to lay out some other detail on the dashboard. Now, one of the things, I picked this up in a place that used to be Lee Ward's and now it's Michael's. These are little tiny, I don't know how, probably not even going to be able to do this on the macro lens. They're little jewels. And what I thought these would look like would be in a real airplane, especially a real Spitfire. They'd have a gear up and a gear down light and maybe some other lights indicating, you know, other things, low fuel or whatever. And these would make great little lights for the dashboard. So I picked up red ones, white ones, and blue ones, and I'm going to see if I can use these in some predictable way. They're little rhinestones. They look real nice. Again, what I'm thinking is as you walk past the plane, the sun will catch it, and you'll just see that little glint. As same as you see the glass on the instruments, you'll see the glass, the little rhinestone there. So I'll put a couple more of these on here, no specific thing. I've been pushing it down with this little John Pothier thing that has the little voice inside. I just dip it in some thin CA. Oh yeah, dip it in some thin CA and then just drop it down. I hope these hold. We'll find out. I just took an ink line pen and put a few rivet heads here, a few little details. Nothing special here, but this is ready to go now right into the dashboard. Let me go start cutting it up, make sure I get a good fit in there. Just trying to get a look at how this is going to look. I'm trying to look at this from all different angles and see if I've got a look, as much of the Spitfire look as I can reasonably have. Okay, that's in there permanently now, and I'm just trying to figure what's going to be the next logical step here. I have to make a stick, I have to make some sides, I have to do some painting. But again, I basically just keep looking at it and figuring out if I have the look that I'm after. Now I've painted around the edges of the cockpit here, but notice that I'm leaving the last eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch or so, the part that we're not going to see, so epoxy will get a good grip. I don't want to be putting the epoxy right into the paint. I'd rather be putting the epoxy right into raw wood if possible. And that's just that flat black that I have mixed up from earlier this morning. Now I'm just putting some imaginary dots around here. These are just the outlines of what I hope I'll be able to use when I get the cockpit actually on there. I can see which I want to keep. Now I can always put the rivet head right in the middle of this, and then it leaves like a little donut effect. Again, I just want to get this drying overnight. This is about all I'm going to be able to work on tonight. And maybe if I do have some extra time, I'll do the inside of the canopy. See, it'd be nice to have the inside of the canopy rivetized too. But, oh, just looking at my watch here. There's no way. We will see you tomorrow. The wife is definitely going to be mad that I'm down here having fun with the Spitfire. This is it. See you in the morning. Okay, today I just want to really look around and see what I can work on here. This is going to be a really limited session, but there'll be plenty to do, believe me. So I have plenty of little ideas I want to work on. Now, I took the inside of the canopy. All this paint, by the way, is on the inside, obviously. I worked on this, just putting the dots in, and that's really a simple little thing. You know, if you've never done that before, maybe I should put some of this on a video. Putting these little dots in is just one of the ways of simulating some kind of riveting. And what I'll do is you just keep changing color. You start off with a light color, put a dark color, sometimes 3, even 4 colors. And at some point in time, it really adds a little detail to what otherwise would just be a flat black surface. Now the key here is to look from a lot of different angles. See, from this angle I can see those little jewels in there. I kind of like that look. I can see the glass reflecting off the instruments, and I can see that there's several different flat finishes. This is a sandpaper finish, a flat black finish, and a 1200 sandpaper finish. So just having those textures, finishes, and I'm going to finish off all the rivet work. And again, there's so many little things you can do in a cockpit, and it's nice and relaxing. It's not something you have to worry about like putting motor mounts in. But you sure don't want to have anything in a cockpit come flying loose 100 flights into the new plane. In fact, just thinking it, I remember Gene Schaefer had a plane that the pilot's head came off. And we used to laugh just before appearance judge, and he'd play like this game, jiggle it and try to get the pilot's head back up in place. And the pilot would sit there and go to appearance judge and hope as soon as they picked the plane up, boom, he'd fall over. So anyway, kind of happy with the way this works. Remember, it's that light reflecting off of there that's what I'm looking for. It's little tiny details like this that all of a sudden when you're looking at somebody's appearance judging planes and all of a sudden they say, ooh, it's got something there that nobody else has. That's kind of cool. See those little lights, whatever you want to call them, just more detailing. No end to it. And one of the things you can always use to add a little detailing is good old-fashioned ink pens. And again, a lot of this is just in the mind's eye, and it's something you're not going to see from once the canopy's on, but you're going to get the impression as you go through the sun, as the sun reflects, ooh, there's something in there. It's not just nothing. Now this is the little piece that we cut out from the nose top block, and of course it's already got the curve in it, so it simulates, in fact it's almost a perfect simulation of a Spitfire seat. So what I'm going to do is get this painted and get this jiggled in there into a spot where it looks realistic. I notched this out for the little headrest, and I'm leaving the bottom flat, the back is flat, because I want that to have a good glue joint, and I sure as hell don't want the seat to come jumping loose halfway through, you know, the team trials or the Nats or something. And what I'm doing, I'm mixing up a little bit of Sig Silver, a little bit of black. I want to make like a gunmetal blackish paste. And the idea of this is I want every color of black that's inside the canopy, every different item to be a different texture, not to be exactly the same. In a seat, I just want to have just a little bit of a different shade. This way it looks like you didn't do it all out of the same paint can or brush or whatever. Now the talcum powder, the more you put in, it serves to make it dull and flat, realistic. I don't think anything inside a real cockpit should be shiny. It should be all dull and flat. If you've ever flown a real plane, you know what a pain in the ass it is to have sun reflecting off of anything. Alright, so this is kind of a gunmetal black. But I won't use this paint now on anything else. The next thing I make, I'll make up with just a little different shade, maybe a little bit of yellow shade or green shade, so that each color is just a little bit different, and it'll catch your eye just a little bit. Just looks a little more interesting and complex instead of looking like it all got punched out of a cookie cutter. Now this takes a little practice, but I let the paint just kick off. It's just starting to get sticky, and then stipple it. This gives you a rough texture, and it just obviously doesn't look like balsa wood. That's what we're looking for, is just a rough, kind of a gunmetal-y, cold metal kind of texture here. And it's the variety of textures that you can get that really make it, whether it's doll houses or model railroads or anything, it's the textures and the little variances in color that make it look more realistic than it normally would. The next thing I want to try to make up anyway is this little seat belt harness, shoulder harness, whatever you want to call it. And I just cut out a random H section of 400 sandpaper. You can see the 400 sand. I don't know if you can see the numbers on it. Anyway, now what I'm going to do is get some thick CA in there, and as I get some thick CA, kind of fold this back so it'll look more and more like a shoulder harness, and then work my way right down here all the way to the bottom, and I'll have what amounts to be the outline of a shoulder harness. Now it's always really difficult getting this sandpaper to go back down over itself, but this really gives you a nice, if you get it right, it really does work well. You want to get just the slightest bead of slow CA in there. Lay it on something flat. This is the trick. And then try to bend it all in one shot. Now once you get it bent, just a little bit of kicker and get it back down there. And this makes, I guess all the planes, Strega, the Red Baron, all of the ones that have real nice canopies have a shoulder harness. Now the other part that's a little bit difficult to simulate here is the belt buckles. Now another real good material for simulating little cockpit details. This is the package that you can see it's kind of a soft tin. This is the thing that scalpel blades come in, and I just strip off a little piece to make some belt buckles, some harness buckles. I guess if you didn't have this tin foil it'd be okay. Just keep stretching it and you'll see it'll get a very well, like aluminum look that you would, about the shininess that a belt buckle would be. And this will pick up the sunlight at just perfect times when somebody's got the plane in the sun. And I just wrap this around several times. So you know what I do? I have a little piece of the sandpaper sticking out on one side, which looks like the tongue and groove, I guess the look that I'm looking for. And you just put a little CA on that on the back, and I have one of my little harness buckles. Now I'm just stretching out another piece of this. See how nice, and I didn't even notice it until I had this all together, these nice little indentations here. If you had tin foil and you didn't have those indentations, you could put them in with a pin. It would just give you one more little thing you could detail. Now these are just little scraps of sandpaper that I want to get this positioned, because I want this to look like a shoulder harness would look. And I'll wrap the same thing. I'll wrap the tin foil around here and around here. And I'll have simulated buckles with the little piece that pulls through. So here I have the little piece you would normally pull through. And you can see the little tongue sticking out. Now I'll just make the other one up, and this will be ready to install. Okay, that's ready to install on the seat. Now I'll just glue it to the back and the bottom of the seat. It'll be ready to install on the plane. Okay, that's ready to mount in the plane. You can see just the slightly different texture in the paint here, and the paint on the floor, then the sandpaper, then the paint that I used on this. All these small differences in texture and color, and the fact that they're all relatively dull, really adds a nice little realistic dimension. Now the next thing I want to make up here on the side here, even though this is not scale, I want to make a little strip of wood here with the quadrant, the throttle quadrant, and the prop quadrant, one on each side. Even though that isn't scale, that'll add a little dimension, a little detail to one of the blank spots in the cockpit. The buckles look good, by the way. Always after I do one of the details, I always put the canopy back on to see, and I can see the rivet heads inside, on the inside of these, the buckles. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, like I said before, I'm going to make up the quadrants here. Alright, step one in making up the throttle quadrants. Just have a piece of scrap 1/4 inch. I'll go whack that out on a saw, and then cut a notch in here for the simulated throttle. Now what I want to do is take a parting wheel and just put a notch in here so it simulates where the throttle normally would be sliding back and forth. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is angle this off. Otherwise this would butt up against the dashboard and conceal some of the gauges and things, so I want to cut some of this off on about a 45-degree angle. Okay, now I want to put some simulated lightning holes in here with the Dremel tool. That's one of the things Uwe Degner's tool comes in real handy for, by the way. Now what I want to do, I want to put this up on a little pedestal and get a coat of paint on here. And while this is drying, I'll make up the levers. A little time management here. Now just before the paint dries, I like to get in here. This gets all the hairs from dremeling these holes at it. Makes them a little smoother, because we're ultimately going to get an ink marker in there, and I don't want to see the hairs. So this just squashes them down as the paint is drying. We'll start with an ordinary T-pen. Now you can wrap some of that tin foil around the tip, and now I'm going to get some thick CA, and I want to build this up. And then I can Dremel it all down to the shape that I want. It's not that tricky. You want to just keep a blob and let it keep running. If you do this, rotisserize it for a few minutes, it'll just turn into a blob. I take a little piece of aluminum tubing, put a little slit in it with the good old parting wheel. And you can shove that end of the pin in and just CA it in, and now we'll just trim this off, and we'll have one of the throttle quadrants made. Now I'm just going to fill this up with CA. Again, you could make them any diameter and then dress this off with a little light sandpaper. Paint it black, it'll look very realistic. Now you just take a big old ink marker. Once the paint is really tacked out, this gives a three-dimensional look to the lightning holes. Now we can put some little simulated rivet heads in here. Anything just to dress it up, to busy it up. You can go right across here. A lot easier to do this than after you install it inside the canopy, that's for sure. Again, there's no set pattern, you can just be a little creative here. Just put a few little ink line details on here. I'm ready to, just waiting for the black paint to dry. I could put the quadrant in there. This will be ready to install. Now while the other one is drying, I made the other one a matching set, and they'll be ready to install as soon as the little handle controls are dry. So I'll just give that a minute to dry. We're ready to install it. Now one step, if you really want to make it look realistic, you got to get inside the slot black. Just one more little detail. Now if you forget this step, one of the things that you run the risk is that this little guy will move. And you don't want him going off on a 30-degree angle. Nah, that's nice and tight. I think that kind of A little bit looks like a throttle quadrant anyway. Cute. Now I don't know if you can see this on the video, but this is really starting to look, this is the first time it's really starting to look scale and busy and detailed and everything in there. And there's so much more yet to do. Things are sparkling and changing and they look like aluminum. The dull sandpaper finishes, the finish of the dashboard, everything has a different point in time that it reflects. So that is really coming out even better than I thought it would. Now this is a real Spitfire cockpit, and obviously I'm not going to go crazy, you know, or be disappointed that I haven't simulated all of these details because it's not a scale model. There's still some things I want to do to joystick, some more detailing, some painting, and I'm not going to get a chance to do it on this tape. We're getting near the end of the tape, so let me just say goodbye for now, and thank you for joining us. Hope that you, in turn, here's something I could try to simulate. If you see my technique for trying to research and document things and then knowing when you can and when you can't do it, I think your modeling will be a lot better than if you never had this experience or if you never watched the tapes.